Sherlock Holmes and the Case of the Automaton's Secret. An honouring Audiobooks original story from the reminiscences of John H. Watson, M.D. Chapter 1. The Inventor's Plea. The relentless clang and hiss of London's industrial heart, usually a distant murmur from our Baker Street windows, seemed particularly muted this late autumn evening. A thick, sooty fog, characteristic of the city's more industrious quarters, had crept inland, muffling the usual cacophony of hansom cabs and street vendors. Within the familiar confines of our sitting-room, however, an even deeper silence reigned, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the almost imperceptible rustle of my newspaper. My esteemed companion, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, was, to my mild consternation, immersed in one of his periods of profound intellectual inactivity, a state that invariably preceded either a burst of furious energy or a descent into the depths of a melancholic ennui. His long, slender fingers, usually so restless, were steepled beneath his chin. His eyes, typically alight with keen observation, now held a distant, almost vacant stare fixed upon the swirling patterns of smoke from his pipe. The violin, that ever-present companion to his deepest thoughts, lay untouched upon the mantelpiece. Even his chemical apparatus, usually bubbling with some noxious concoction, stood silent and inert in the corner. "Watson," he declared abruptly, startling me so profoundly that my medical journal slipped from my grasp to the floor, "the human mind, much like a finely tuned instrument, requires constant exercise. Without a worthy melody to play, it grows discordant. It rusts, my dear fellow, it rusts." I retrieved my journal, a familiar sigh escaping my lips. "My dear Holmes, you speak as if the very wellspring of crime has dried up in this great city. Surely, amidst these teeming millions, there is some villainy, some intricate puzzle, worthy of your formidable talents?" He merely grunted, a low, dismissive sound. "The common villain, Watson, is a predictable creature. His motives are base, his methods crude. A simple robbery, a straightforward domestic squabble culminating in violence. These are mere trifles, exercises for the plodding intellect of Scotland Yard. My mind craves the intricate dance of the unknown, the subtle nuances of a truly extraordinary deception." He paused, a flicker of impatience crossing his features. "No, Watson. What I require is a labyrinth of deceit, a crime that defies the mundane, a whisper of the truly extraordinary." As if in direct answer to his unspoken wish, a sharp, insistent rap echoed from the street door below, reverberating through the quiet house. Holmes's head snapped up, a subtle shift in his posture, an almost imperceptible sharpening of his attention. A nascent spark, a flicker of anticipation, ignited in his grey eyes. "Ah, a caller," he murmured, a faint smile playing upon his lips. "And at this hour. Observe, Watson, the subtle nuances of a late-night summons. It speaks of urgency, of desperation, perhaps even of a fear that could not wait for the dawn." Mrs. Hudson's hurried footsteps ascended the stairs, followed by a heavier yet distinctly purposeful tread. The door to our sitting-room opened, and our landlady, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity, announced, "A gentleman to see you, Mr. Holmes. Says it's a matter of the gravest importance. Mr. Elias Thorne." The name Elias Thorne was unfamiliar to me, yet it carried a certain gravitas, a hint of scientific endeavour. The man who entered was indeed a gentleman, though one whose usual composure seemed to have been violently dislodged. He was of medium height, perhaps in his late 40s, with a shock of unruly greying hair and eyes that, even from across the room, betrayed a profound agitation. His tweed coat, though of good quality, was smudged with grease and dust, and his hands, though slender, were calloused, bearing the faint scent of oil and metal. "Mr. Holmes," he began, his voice a strained baritone, "I apologize for this unseasonable intrusion, but I assure you, my predicament is of such an extraordinary nature that I felt I had no recourse but to seek your unparalleled assistance immediately." Holmes, ever the master of the subtle assessment, gestured towards a chair. "Pray, be seated, Mr. Thorne. You appear to have travelled from some distance. A cup of tea, perhaps, to ward off the chill?" "No, thank you, Mr. Holmes," Thorne replied, though he gratefully sank into the offered seat, his gaze darting nervously about the room before settling on Holmes. "My mind is far too agitated for such pleasantries. I fear I have been the victim of a most peculiar and unsettling theft." "Indeed?" Holmes's voice was calm, almost languid, yet I detected the subtle shift in his posture, the almost imperceptible sharpening of his attention. "A theft, you say? Of what nature, Mr. Thorne?" Thorne took a deep, shuddering breath. "Of an automaton, Mr. Holmes. A singular creation, the Clockwork Nightingale." I exchanged a glance with Holmes. An automaton? While any theft was regrettable, this hardly seemed the sort of grand criminal enterprise that would rouse Holmes from his intellectual slumber. Yet the man's genuine distress was palpable. Holmes, however, merely steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable. "An automaton, Mr. Thorne? And you deem this a matter of the gravest importance?" "Not merely an automaton, Mr. Holmes," Thorne exclaimed, leaning forward, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "This Nightingale, sir, is unique. It is the culmination of 20 years of my life's work. It is crafted from over 10,000 individually machined parts, each no larger than a grain of rice. Its internal mechanisms mimic the very musculature of a living bird, allowing it to sing with a purity and complexity that rivals nature itself. Its feathers are spun from pure silver, its eyes are tiny sapphires, and its heart is a marvel of intricate clockwork, pulsating with artificial life. It is said to possess a soul, Mr. Holmes, a true spark of genius, so utterly unlike any other that it is almost supernatural." "Fascinating," Holmes murmured, a genuine note of interest now in his tone. "And this unique creation has been stolen from your possession?" "From my private workshop, Mr. Holmes, a structure of reinforced steel and heavy oak, secured by the most modern locks and a sophisticated pressure plate alarm system. Located deep within the heart of the industrial district, surrounded by my other less valuable inventions. And yet this morning, when my apprentice, young Thomas, went to begin his duties, the display pedestal was empty. Gone. Vanished without a trace." "Without a trace, you say?" Holmes's eyes narrowed. "No forced entry? No broken locks? No disturbed alarm wires?" "None whatsoever." Thorne wrung his hands. "The windows were intact, the doors locked from the inside. The alarm system, which is connected directly to the local constabulary, showed no signs of activation. It is as if the Nightingale simply dematerialized." "Dematerialized, Mr. Thorne, is a concept more suited to the spiritualists than to the practicalities of criminal enterprise," Holmes said dryly. "However, a theft without apparent entry is indeed intriguing. Tell me, who knew of this automaton's completion and its presence in your workshop?" "Only a select few, Mr. Holmes. Myself, of course, my niece, Miss Clara Thorne, who assists me with my accounts, my trusted apprentice, Thomas Finch, and a rival inventor of some renown, Mr. Phileas Croft, who had expressed a keen interest in acquiring my patents, particularly those related to the Nightingale's unique articulation." "Mr. Hay, Phileas Croft," Holmes repeated, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. "I recall the name. A specialist in automatons and mechanical devices, if my memory serves." "He was a guest just last week," Thorne confirmed. "He spent several days examining the Nightingale, making precise measurements, taking notes. He was quite enthralled by it. He even offered a sum, a truly astronomical sum, I might add, for its acquisition and the associated patents. An offer I, of course, politely declined. The Clockwork Nightingale is my life's work, Mr. Holmes, not a commodity to be bought and sold." "And when did Mr. Croft depart?" 2 days ago. He left by the morning train, expressing his admiration for my genius." "And since his departure, has anyone else had access to the workshop?" "Only Thomas, for his daily duties of cleaning and preparing the tools, and myself, for my evening perusal of blueprints. No one else. My workshop is a fortress, Mr. Holmes, secured against all intruders. The staff are all long-serving and utterly trustworthy." Holmes leaned back, his gaze fixed on the ceiling, a sure sign that his formidable intellect was now fully engaged. "Mr. Thorne, you mentioned this Nightingale is said to possess a soul and to sing with a purity that rivals nature itself. What is its significance beyond its mechanical brilliance?" Thorne hesitated, his eyes flickering towards me. "Forgive me, Mr. Holmes, but this is a delicate matter. The Nightingale, it is believed to possess certain properties. Its song, some say, can soothe the most troubled mind. Others whisper of a more esoteric influence." "Esoteric influence?" I interjected, my medical curiosity piqued. "What sort of influence?" Thorne shifted uncomfortably. "There is an old legend, Dr. Watson, A rather fanciful tale, I assure you, but one that has persisted amongst certain collectors of automatons. It is said that the Clockwork Nightingale, when its song is heard by one of pure heart, can reveal hidden truths, a heightened perception. Some even claim it bestows a brief, fleeting glimpse into the future, particularly concerning matters of invention and innovation. I scoffed. Superstitious nonsense, Mr. Thorne. A mere machine, however intricate, cannot possess such powers. Perhaps not, Dr. Watson, Thorne said, though his tone suggested he was not entirely convinced by his own dismissal. But the legend persists, and it is this legend, I fear, that may have motivated the thief. Holmes, who had listened to this exchange with an almost detached interest, now spoke. A legend, however improbable, can certainly provide a motive, Mr. Thorne, especially for those predisposed to believe in such things. Now let us return to the practicalities. Describe the workshop in detail, its dimensions, its layout, the location of the Nightingale's display pedestal. Thorne, eager to provide any assistance, launched into a meticulous description of the workshop. It was a large, bustling space during the day, but at night it was secured. The Nightingale was housed in a climate-controlled, illuminated display case set into a reinforced steel wall, accessible only through a complex, numerically coded lock. The room itself had no windows that opened, and its single heavy steel door was secured with multiple bolts and the pressure plate alarm. And the locks, Holmes pressed, were they tampered with? No, Mr. Holmes. The steel door was locked from the inside, as always. Thomas, who has the only key in the code, found it so this morning. He unlocked it, entered, and found the display case empty. Locked from the inside, Holmes repeated slowly, a new light dawning in his eyes. This is indeed a curious detail. Tell me, Mr. Thorne, is there any other way into this workshop? A ventilation shaft, a hidden passage, a service tunnel? Thorne shook his head vehemently. Absolutely not. It was designed to be impenetrable. My life's work was within. And the key and code, Mr. Thorne? Who possesses them? Only Thomas, as I said, and myself. He keeps them on a chain around his neck, and the code is memorized. He is a young man of impeccable character, utterly devoted to his apprenticeship. He has been with me for 5 years. A chain around his neck, Holmes mused, and he would have been the first to discover the theft. Did he appear distressed? Profoundly so, Mr. Thorne. He was quite beside himself. He wept, I believe. He felt personally responsible. Indeed, and what of your niece, Miss Clara Thorne? What is her disposition towards this automaton and its legend? Thorne hesitated again, a shadow crossing his features. Clara, she is a woman of a more practical disposition, Mr. Holmes. She handles the business side of my inventions. She finds the legends rather quaint, I think, but she understands the Nightingale's immense value. And her relationship with Mr. Phileas Croft. Cordial, I suppose. They discussed patents and market values during his visit. Clara has always had a keen interest in the financial aspects of my work. Holmes rose from his chair and walked to the window, peering out into the fog-shrouded street. Mr. Thorne, this case, while superficially simple, presents several intriguing contradictions. A theft without apparent entry, a unique object of immense value, both mechanical and, to some, mystical, and a limited circle of individuals with knowledge of its existence and completion. I confess my interest is piqued. A wave of relief washed over Thorne's face. Then you will take the case, Mr. Holmes? Indeed, Watson, prepare your bag. We shall journey to Mr. Thorne's workshop at once. I nodded, already anticipating the familiar thrill of the chase. Holmes, invigorated by the prospect of a new challenge, was a man transformed. The ennui had vanished, replaced by that keen, almost predatory alertness that always preceded his most brilliant deductions. The game, as he would say, was most certainly afoot. Chapter 2. The Heart of Industry. The journey from the quiet respectability of Baker Street to the bustling, smoke-choked heart of London's industrial district was a stark transition. The hansom cab, usually a swift conveyance, seemed to crawl through the narrow, cobbled streets, choked by the incessant traffic of drays, carts, and the hurried footsteps of countless labourers. The air grew thick with the acrid scent of coal smoke, hot metal, and something vaguely chemical, a pervasive odour that spoke of ceaseless toil and relentless innovation. Elias Thorne, our agitated client, sat opposite us, his face still etched with worry, though a flicker of desperate hope now mingled with his distress. "The workshop, Mr. Holmes," he explained, his voice strained above the din, "is located in a converted warehouse, deep within the labyrinthine alleys off Clerkenwell Road. It is not a place for the faint of heart, I assure you, but it is where my genius flourishes, unburdened by the distractions of polite society." Holmes merely nodded, his gaze sweeping over the grim, soot-stained buildings, his eyes missing nothing. He observed the grime on the brickwork, the patterns of wear on the cobblestones, the subtle variations in the plumes of smoke issuing from countless chimneys. His mind, I knew, was already absorbing the nuances of this new environment, seeking the telltale signs that might illuminate the mystery before us. "A fascinating tableau, Watson," he murmured, almost to himself, "the very crucible of modern ingenuity. And yet, even amidst such progress, the ancient vices of man persist. Theft, avarice, ambition. They merely don new guises." It was well past dawn when our cab finally turned into a particularly narrow, uninviting alley, its entrance almost obscured by towering stacks of crates and barrels. At the end of the alley stood a formidable edifice of dark, reinforced brick and steel, its few windows small and heavily barred. This was Elias Thorne's workshop. The heavy steel door, though unadorned, exuded an air of complex lock, and a small, almost invisible pressure plate was visible just beneath the threshold. "This is it, gentlemen," Thorne announced, his voice tinged with a mixture of pride and despair. "My fortress. And yet the Nightingale has vanished." We were admitted by a young man, perhaps no older than 20, with a lean build and hands stained with oil and grime. This was Thomas Finch, Elias Thorne's apprentice. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, and his usually neat hair was dishevelled. He wrung his hands nervously as he greeted us. "Mr. Thorne, sir," he stammered, his voice trembling, I still cannot believe it. The Nightingale gone. I checked everything, sir. The locks, the alarm, all as they should be." Holmes, ever the master of the subtle assessment, observed Thomas closely. "Mr. Finch, I understand you were the first to discover the absence of the Clockwork Nightingale this morning." "Yes, sir," Thomas replied, his gaze darting between Holmes and his master. "I arrived at 6, as always, to begin the day's preparations. The main door was locked, the alarm set. I disarmed it, entered, and the pedestal was empty." His voice broke, and he wiped a tear from his eye with the back of a greasy hand. "Tell me, Mr. Finch, your routine," Holmes continued, his voice gentle but firm. "What time do you arrive at the workshop each morning?" "Always at 6, sir. Sharp. To open the shutters, check the machinery, prepare the master's workbench." "And you found the steel door to this workshop locked?" "Yes, sir. Just as I left it last night, locked from the inside." "And you possess the only key and the code for the numerical lock?" "That's right, sir. The key is always on my chain. The code, I commit it to memory each night and clear it from my mind. No one else knows it, save for Mr. Thorne." He patted his chest, where a faint indentation was visible beneath his waistcoat, similar to the one Percival had shown us at Wyndham Hall. "Did you notice anything unusual last night, Mr. Finch? Any sounds? Any lights?" Thomas frowned, thinking deeply. "No, sir, not a thing. The night was quiet, save for the usual distant rumble of the city. The fog, it was thick, mind you, swallowed up all sound." "And when you entered this morning, did you touch anything before you realized the Nightingale was gone?" "No, sir. I just saw the empty pedestal. My heart sank, sir. It truly did." Holmes observed Thomas closely, his eyes missing nothing. "Thank you, Mr. Finch. That will be all for now. Please return to your duties if you are able." As Thomas shuffled away, his shoulders slumped with apparent grief, Holmes turned to Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, I should now like to speak with Miss Clara Thorne." Miss Clara Thorne was a woman of sharp intellect and an almost austere practicality, perhaps in her early 30s. She was seated at a large, meticulously organized desk in a small office adjacent to the main workshop, surrounded by ledgers and financial documents. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her spectacles perched on her nose gave her an air of quiet authority. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she greeted us, her voice crisp and efficient. "My uncle has informed me of your presence. This business with the Nightingale is a grave setback, both scientifically and financially." "Indeed, Miss Thorne," Holmes replied, taking a seat opposite her. "Your uncle mentioned your particular interest in the Nightingale's immense value and its associated patents." A faint, almost imperceptible tightening around her mouth was the only sign of emotion. "Its value is undeniable, Mr. Holmes. 20 years of my uncle's life and a fortune in materials and labour. Its patents alone would revolutionise several industries. I am merely concerned with the practical realities of its loss." "And its legendary properties, Miss Thorne," Holmes pressed gently. "The whispers of revealing hidden truths or glimpses into the future of invention, do these hold any sway over your practical disposition?" Clara Thorne scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound. "Mr. Holmes, I deal in figures and facts, not fanciful folklore. Such superstitions are for the credulous. My interest in the Nightingale was purely in its market value and its potential for commercial exploitation." Her denial was firm, almost disdainful, yet I detected a subtle tension in her posture, a slight stiffening of her spine. It was a fleeting impression, perhaps, but one that Holmes, I knew, would not have missed. "You conversed with Mr. Phileas Croft during his visit, Miss Thorne?" Holmes continued, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, at length. He is a shrewd businessman, if somewhat unconventional. He was quite captivated by the Nightingale's potential, particularly its unique articulation mechanisms. He made a most generous offer for its acquisition and patents." "Did he express any unusual interest in its properties beyond the purely mechanical or financial?" Clara Thorne hesitated, her eyes flickering away. He was certainly curious about my uncle's creative process. He asked many questions about the inspiration behind the Nightingale, perhaps more than one would expect from a purely commercial mind." "Did he, Miss Thorne, ever suggest a means by which one might bypass the security of the workshop?" Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. "Mr. Holmes, what a preposterous suggestion! Mr. Croft is a rival, yes, but a man of honour, I believe." "Indeed," Holmes said smoothly. "Forgive my directness, Miss Thorne. It is merely a process of elimination. The Nightingale vanished from a locked workshop, and the method of entry points to someone with intimate knowledge of the room's structure and a certain specialised skill." Clara Thorne composed herself. He certainly did not. He spoke only of his admiration for the Nightingale and his desire to acquire it through legitimate means. "And your own movements, Miss Thorne? Were you in the workshop at any point during the night of the theft?" "Good heavens, no. I retired to my lodgings in Bloomsbury shortly after dinner and did not leave them until this morning. I heard nothing untoward." "Thank you, Miss Thorne," Holmes said, rising. "Your insights have been most helpful." As we left the office, I turned to Holmes. "She seems genuinely surprised by the suggestion of Croft's involvement, and her dismissal of the legend's influence on her seemed rather unconvincing, despite her practical demeanour." "Indeed, Watson," Holmes murmured. "A woman of practical temperament, as her uncle described. Such individuals often mask deeper, more complex motivations beneath a veneer of cold logic. Now I believe a thorough examination of the workshop's interior and perhaps the surrounding industrial complex is in order. There is a curious inconsistency in Thomas Finch's account that bears closer scrutiny." We returned to the main workshop. It was a vast, cavernous space, filled with the silent hulks of half-finished inventions, gleaming tools, and the pervasive scent of oil and metal. The fog, though thinning outside, still diffused the light entering through the grimy skylights, lending an ethereal quality to the scene. Holmes immediately began his meticulous examination. He ignored the empty display pedestal for a moment, instead focusing on the floor around it. He knelt, producing his magnifying glass, and scrutinized the finely swept concrete. "You said this was undisturbed, Mr. Thorne?" Holmes asked, his voice low. "Completely, Mr. Holmes. Not a single footprint, not a displaced speck of dust." "Indeed," Holmes murmured, his eyes sweeping over the pristine surface. "Remarkable. And the air, Watson, the scent of oil and metal is even stronger here, is it not? Mixed with something else, something faintly electrical, almost like ozone. Oily aroma was indeed more pronounced, almost cloying in its intensity. It was a rich, deep, yet subtly sharp scent, unlike any I had encountered outside a power station." Holmes then turned his attention to the display pedestal itself. He ran his gloved hand over its smooth, polished surface, then peered closely at the small indentation where the Nightingale would have rested. "The Nightingale was secured to the pedestal with a clamp, I presume?" "Yes, Mr. Holmes, a specially designed clamp, operated by a hidden lever beneath the pedestal. It could only be released by someone with knowledge of its mechanism. Holmes nodded, then moved to the reinforced steel wall where the display case was set. He examined the steel, the heavy bolts and the numerical lock. He tapped the metal, listened intently, and ran his fingers along the seams. No hidden panels, he concluded. No secret passages. The structure is sound. Which brings us back to the central enigma. How did the Nightingale depart this locked workshop without disturbing the environment? He stood in the centre of the room, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze sweeping slowly from floor to ceiling, as if willing the solution to materialize before his eyes. Suddenly his eyes narrowed. He walked to a section of the steel wall, one that appeared perfectly solid. He ran his fingers along a faint, almost invisible line in the steel, a line that seemed to follow the contours of a large circular vent near the ceiling. He then produced a small, powerful magnet from his pocket and held it against the steel. The magnet clung to the wall, but in one small section it seemed to vibrate, almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Thorne," Holmes called out, his voice low, "what lies behind this section of the wall?" Thorne joined him, looking perplexed. "Nothing, Mr. Holmes. That is merely a reinforced section of the outer wall. There is nothing behind it but the alleyway." "Indeed," Holmes murmured. "Then why, I wonder, does this section of solid steel possess a faint, almost imperceptible seam, and why does my magnet detect a subtle anomaly within its structure?" "It suggests a hidden panel, Mr. Thorne, a section of the wall designed to slide or pivot rather than being a solid, impenetrable barrier." Thorne stared at the wall, then at Holmes, his mouth agape. "A hidden panel? But that's impossible. I designed this workshop myself. There are no such features." "Perhaps not, Mr. Thorne," Holmes said, a faint smile playing on his lips, "but a secret, however well kept, can be discovered, and then perhaps exploited. Let us examine this panel more closely." He then produced a slender, almost invisible tool from his kit, and with a few deft manipulations he inserted it into the faint seam. There was a soft click, and with a barely audible hiss of displaced air, a section of the steel wall, perhaps 8 feet high and 4 feet wide, slowly, silently slid inwards, revealing a narrow, dark passage beyond. The air that wafted from within was cold and damp, carrying a faint, earthy scent, mingled with something else, something faintly electrical, almost like ozone, the same scent I had detected earlier. "Good heavens!" Thorne exclaimed, his face paling. "A hidden passage! But how? And who could have known about it?" "Ah, those are excellent questions, Mr. Thorne," Holmes said, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "Questions that lead us back to our limited circle of suspects, the individual who knew the layout of the workshop intimately, who knew of the Nightingale's presence, and who possessed the ingenuity to execute such a precise and audacious theft, and the knowledge, perhaps, of a specific tool that could bypass your elaborate security." "Mr. Croft!" Thorne whispered, his face contorted with a mixture of anger and dawning understanding. "A strong candidate, certainly," Holmes agreed. "He had access, he had knowledge, and he had a motive, a scientific ambition perhaps, or a belief in the Nightingale's more esoteric properties, a belief he may have feigned to dismiss. But there is another possibility, Mr. Thorne, one that is perhaps even more unsettling." He paused, allowing his words to hang in the air, creating a dramatic tension that was almost unbearable. "The thief, Mr. Thorne," Holmes continued, his voice dropping to a low, resonant tone, "possessed not only knowledge of the workshop's hidden weakness, but also a means to access it without arousing suspicion, a means that would allow them to move about the industrial complex unseen, even in the dead of night." He turned to Thorne, his gaze piercing. "Tell me, Mr. Thorne, does your niece, Miss Clara, possess a particular affinity for clandestine activities, or perhaps a secret passion for engineering or lock-picking that extends beyond casual interest?" Thorne stared at Holmes, his mouth agape, a look of profound shock spreading across his features. "Clara? My niece? Mr. Holmes, that is an outrageous accusation." "Is it, Mr. Thorne?" Holmes countered, his voice calm but insistent. "Consider the facts. She knew of the Nightingale's completion. She was fascinated by its financial value. She was present in the workshop, and she possessed a motive, however practical it may seem to us, the allure of immense wealth and control over your patents. Furthermore, the electrical scent, so strong in the workshop, suggests a manipulation of the Nightingale's internal mechanisms, a precise re-engineering that would require a certain dexterity, a familiarity with such delicate work. And her dismissal of the legend, while logical for a practical mind, lacked a certain conviction. But why? Thorne stammered, clearly struggling to comprehend the implication. Why would Clara steal my life's work? That, Mr. Thorne, is the core of the mystery, Holmes said, stepping into the newly revealed passage. The why is often more complex than the how, but I believe we have established the how. Now we must uncover the motive and the full extent of this peculiar intrigue. He paused, looking back at the vast, silent workshop, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. This case, Watson, has just become considerably more interesting. I knew then that the intellectual torpor had been thoroughly banished. The hunt was on, and the scent of the Clockwork Nightingale, both literal and metaphorical, now led us down a path far more winding and perilous than any of us could have initially imagined. The game, as Holmes would say, was most certainly afoot. Chapter 4. The Shadow of the Broker. The revelation of Thomas Finch's unrequited love and his manipulation by a shadowy broker of patents had shifted the entire landscape of the case. Elias Thorne, our client, stood utterly bewildered, his initial anger at his niece Clara now replaced by a profound pity for her misguided actions and a dawning fury at the unseen hand that had exploited his apprentice. The vast, silent workshop, once a testament to Thorne's genius, now felt like a stage upon which a meticulously orchestrated drama of deceit had been played out. "A broker of patents, Mr. Holmes?" Thorne stammered, his voice thick with disbelief. "But who? Who would stoop to such villainy, manipulating a young man's affections for mere commercial gain?" Holmes, his eyes gleaming with that familiar, almost predatory light, closed Thomas Finch's journal and placed it carefully back in the drawer. The motives of such individuals, Mr. Thorne, are rarely mere. They are often driven by a ruthless ambition that transcends conventional morality. This broker, I surmise, is a man who operates in the murky underworld of industrial espionage, preying upon the vulnerable and the ambitious, seeking to profit from the genius of others. I found myself recalling the fleeting impression of a rival's insidious grin from Miss Clara's, even in its delusion, had perceived a truth that her waking mind had dismissed. "Our immediate task, Watson," Holmes declared, turning from the workbench, "is to identify this shadowy figure. Thomas Finch, in his misguided devotion, has provided us with a crucial lead. His journal speaks of a secret meeting and a promise to facilitate the sale of the Nightingale's designs to a rival company. This suggests a specific individual, a known player in the illicit trade of intellectual property." He then turned to Elias Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, you mentioned a rival inventor, Mr. Phileas Croft, who had expressed a keen interest in acquiring your patents. Is it possible that he is connected to this broker, or perhaps is the broker himself?" Thorne frowned, considering this. "Croft is a ruthless competitor, Mr. Holmes, I will grant you that. He has often attempted to acquire my designs through legitimate, albeit aggressive, means. But to resort to such underhanded tactics, to manipulate my apprentice, it seems beneath him, even for Croft." "The depths of human depravity, Mr. Thorne, are often surprisingly profound," Holmes countered. "However, we shall keep Mr. Croft in mind, but our primary focus now must be on the information contained within this journal. Thomas, I believe, has unwittingly provided us with the key to unlocking this mystery." Holmes then instructed Thorne to ensure that Thomas Finch remained unaware of our discovery of his journal and our suspicions. He also requested that Thomas be kept under close yet discreet observation, as he might unwittingly lead us to the broker. Our investigation now shifted from the quiet confines of the workshop to the bustling, often unsavoury, underbelly of London's intellectual property market. Holmes, with his vast network of informants and his unparalleled knowledge of the city's hidden currents, began to make inquiries. He dispatched a series of cryptic telegrams and spent hours poring over dusty ledgers in obscure patent offices and whispering with his contacts in the city's various clubs and taverns. I, for my part, assisted Holmes by meticulously transcribing Thomas Finch's journal, searching for any further clues, any names, dates, or locations that might shed light on the identity of the broker of patents. The entries were a poignant testament to Thomas's desperate love for Miss Clara, his naive belief that by stealing the Nightingale's patents he could somehow earn her affection and secure her future. His descriptions of the broker were vague, referring to him only as a man of shadows, a master of arrangements, and a silent partner in innovation. One particular entry, however, caught Holmes's eye. It spoke of a meeting in a secluded, dimly lit establishment known as the Cog and Compass, a tavern frequented by inventors, engineers, and those who dealt in the less scrupulous aspects of the industrial world. The entry mentioned a specific date, just a few days prior to the Nightingale's theft, and a time, midnight. The Cog and Compass, Watson, Holmes murmured, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. A most appropriate name for such a den of intrigue, and a midnight meeting. Our shadowy broker, it seems, prefers to operate under the cloak of darkness. He then produced a small, exquisitely crafted miniature automaton from his pocket, a tiny silver bird, no larger than a thimble, its wings folded neatly. This, Watson, is a replica of the Clockwork Nightingale, a gift, I imagine, from Elias Thorne to Miss Clara. It possesses a unique internal mechanism, a subtle signature of Thorne's genius. I believe it will serve as our bait. Bait, Holmes? I asked, perplexed. Indeed, Watson, he replied, a faint smile touching his lips. The broker, having secured the patents to the Nightingale, will undoubtedly seek to verify their authenticity, to ensure that Thomas Finch has delivered the genuine article. This replica, with its subtle imperfections and its unique internal signature, will serve as a test. If the broker is truly as cunning as I suspect, he will attempt to acquire this replica, and believing it to be a crucial component in verifying the stolen designs. Our plan was set. That evening, as the industrial district settled into its nocturnal hum, Holmes and I made our way to the Cog and Compass. The tavern was a dimly lit, smoke-filled establishment, its air thick with the scent of stale ale, cheap tobacco, and the faint metallic tang of machinery. The clientele were a rough-and-ready lot, their faces etched with the strains of their arduous professions. We secured a small, secluded table in a corner, from which we could observe the comings and goings without drawing undue attention. Holmes, disguised as a grizzled old engineer, his face smudged with grease, and his hands calloused, blended seamlessly with the surroundings. I, for my part, adopted the demeanour of a quiet, unassuming clerk, sipping a lukewarm ale and feigning interest in a tattered newspaper. Hours passed, marked only by the raucous laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional burst of heated argument. Holmes remained utterly still, his eyes, though seemingly vacant, missing nothing. He observed the subtle gestures, the whispered conversations, the fleeting glances that spoke volumes to his trained eye. Just as the clock struck midnight, a figure entered the tavern, and a hush, almost imperceptible, fell over the room. He was a man of imposing stature, impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit, his features sharp and angular, his eyes cold and calculating. He moved with an air of quiet authority, his presence commanding immediate, if unspoken, respect. He carried a slim leather briefcase, and his gaze swept over the room with a chilling intensity. "That, Watson," Holmes whispered, his voice barely a breath, "is our man, Mr. Silas Wyndham." My jaw dropped. Silas Wyndham! Our former client from the case of the Emerald Serpent, the respectable gentleman, the victim of a supposed theft, was in fact the very broker of patents Holmes sought. The shock was so profound that I almost choked on my ale. "Wyndham," I whispered, utterly bewildered. But he was the victim. He hired us." "Indeed, Watson," Holmes murmured, a grim smile touching his lips. "The most cunning villains, my dear fellow, often hide in plain sight. They create elaborate deceptions, casting themselves as victims, to divert suspicion and to gain access to the very individuals who might expose them. Wyndham, I now surmise, orchestrated the theft of the Serpens Viridis himself, using his daughter's delusion as a cover, and then sought our assistance to recover it, thereby gaining insight into our methods and perhaps to eliminate any potential threats to his true operations." Wyndham moved to a secluded booth in the far corner, where a smaller, nervous-looking man was already waiting. The man, whom I recognized as a minor inventor, known for his desperate financial straits, immediately rose and bowed deferentially. Wyndham merely gestured for him to sit, his expression cold and unreadable. Holmes, with a subtle nod, indicated that I should remain where I was. He then rose and with a casual air walked towards the bar, ordering another ale. As he did so, he deliberately brushed past Wyndham's booth, allowing the miniature Clockwork Nightingale to slip from his pocket and fall silently to the floor, coming to rest just beneath Wyndham's chair. Wyndham, engrossed in his conversation, did not notice. But as Holmes returned to our table, he cast a quick, almost imperceptible glance towards the fallen automaton. A flicker of something, recognition, surprise, crossed his cold features. Minutes later, Wyndham concluded his conversation. He rose, and as he did so, his foot nudged the miniature nightingale. He bent down, picked it up, and examined it with a keen, almost even in its delusion, had perceived a truth that her waking mind had dismissed. "Our immediate task, Watson," Holmes declared, turning from the workbench, "is to identify the shadowy figure. Thomas Finch, in his misguided devotion, has provided us with a crucial lead. His journal speaks of a secret meeting and a promise to facilitate the sale of the Nightingale's designs to a rival company. This suggests a specific individual, a known player in the illicit trade of intellectual property." He then turned to Elias Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, you mentioned a rival inventor, Mr. Phileas Croft, who had expressed a keen interest in acquiring your patents. Is it possible that he is connected to this broker, or perhaps is the broker himself?" Thorne frowned, considering this. "Croft is a ruthless competitor, Mr. Holmes, I will grant you that. He has often attempted to acquire my designs through legitimate, albeit aggressive, means. But to resort to such underhanded tactics, to manipulate my apprentice, it seems beneath him, even for Croft." "The depths of human depravity, Mr. Thorne, are often surprisingly profound," Holmes countered. "However, we shall keep Mr. Croft in mind, but our primary focus now must be on the information contained within this journal. Thomas, I believe, has unwittingly provided us with the key to unlocking this mystery." Holmes then instructed Thorne to ensure that Thomas Finch remained unaware of our discovery of his journal and our suspicions. He also requested that Thomas be kept under close yet discreet observation, as he might unwittingly lead us to the broker. Our investigation now shifted from the quiet confines of the workshop to the bustling, often unsavoury underbelly of London's intellectual property market. Holmes, with his vast network of informants and his unparalleled knowledge of the city's hidden currents, began to make inquiries. He dispatched a series of cryptic telegrams and spent hours poring over dusty ledgers in obscure patent offices and whispering with his contacts in the city's various clubs and taverns. I, for my part, assisted Holmes by meticulously transcribing Thomas Finch's journal, searching for any further clues, any names, dates, or locations that might shed light on the identity of the broker of patents. The entries were a poignant testament to Thomas's desperate love for Miss Clara, his naive belief that by stealing the Nightingale's patents he could somehow earn her affection and secure her future. His descriptions of the broker were vague, referring to him only as a man of shadows, a master of arrangements, and a silent partner in innovation. One particular entry, however, caught Holmes's eye. It spoke of a meeting in a secluded, dimly lit establishment known as the Cog and Compass, a tavern frequented by inventors, engineers, and those who dealt in the less scrupulous aspects of the industrial world. The entry mentioned a specific date, just a few days prior to the Nightingale's theft, and a time midnight. "The Cog and Compass, Watson," Holmes murmured, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "A most appropriate name for such a den of intrigue, and a midnight meeting. Our shadowy broker, it seems, prefers to operate under the cloak of darkness." He then produced a small, exquisitely crafted miniature automaton from his pocket, a tiny silver bird, no larger than a thimble, its wings folded neatly. "This, Watson, is a replica of the Clockwork Nightingale, a gift, I imagine, from Elias Thorne to Miss Clara. It possesses a unique internal mechanism, a subtle signature of Thorne's genius. I believe it will serve as our bait." "Bait, Holmes?" I asked, perplexed. "Indeed, Watson," he replied, a faint smile touching his lips. "The broker, having secured the patents to the Nightingale, will undoubtedly seek to verify their authenticity, to ensure that Thomas Finch has delivered the genuine article. This replica, with its subtle imperfections and its unique internal signature, will serve as a test. If the broker is truly as cunning as I suspect, he will attempt to acquire this replica, believing it to be a crucial component in verifying the stolen designs. Our plan was set. That evening, as the industrial district settled into its nocturnal hum, Holmes and I made our way to the Cog and Compass. The tavern was a dimly lit, smoke-filled establishment, its air thick with the scent of stale ale, cheap tobacco, and the faint metallic tang of machinery. The clientele were a rough-and-ready lot, their faces etched with the strains of their arduous professions. We secured a small, secluded table in a corner, from which we could observe the comings and goings without drawing undue attention. Holmes, disguised as a grizzled old engineer, his face smudged with grease and his hands calloused, blended seamlessly with the surroundings. I, for my part, adopted the demeanour of a quiet, unassuming clerk, sipping a lukewarm ale and feigning interest in a tattered newspaper. Hours passed, marked only by the raucous laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional burst of heated argument. Holmes remained utterly still, his eyes, though seemingly vacant, missing nothing. He observed the subtle gestures, the whispered conversations, the fleeting glances that spoke volumes to his trained eye. Just as the clock struck midnight, a figure entered the tavern, and a hush, almost imperceptible, fell over the room. He was a man of imposing stature, impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit, his features sharp and angular, his eyes cold and calculating. He moved with an air of quiet authority, his presence commanding immediate, if unspoken, respect. He carried a slim leather briefcase, and his gaze swept over the room with a chilling intensity. "That, Watson," Holmes whispered, his voice barely a breath, "is our man, Mr. Silas Wyndham." My jaw dropped. Silas Wyndham, our former client from the case of the Emerald Serpent. The respectable gentleman, the victim of a supposed theft, was in fact the very broker of patents Holmes sought. The shock was so profound that I almost choked on my ale. "Wyndham," I whispered, utterly bewildered. But he was the victim. He hired us." "Indeed, Watson," Holmes murmured, a grim smile touching his lips. "The most cunning villains, my dear fellow, often hide in plain sight. They create elaborate deceptions, casting themselves as victims, to divert suspicion and to gain access to the very individuals who might expose them. Wyndham, I now surmise, orchestrated the theft of the Serpens Viridis himself, using his daughter's delusion as a cover, and then sought our assistance to recover it, thereby gaining insight into our methods and perhaps to eliminate any potential threats to his true operations." Wyndham moved to a secluded booth in the far corner, where a smaller, nervous-looking man was already waiting. The man, whom I recognized as a minor inventor known for his desperate financial straits, immediately rose and bowed deferentially. Wyndham merely gestured for him to sit, his expression cold and unreadable. Holmes, with a subtle nod, indicated that I should remain where I was. He then rose and, with a casual air, walked towards the bar ordering another ale. As he did so, he deliberately brushed past Wyndham's booth, allowing the miniature Clockwork Nightingale to slip from his pocket and fall silently to the floor, coming to rest just beneath Wyndham's chair. Wyndham, engrossed in his conversation, did not notice, but as Holmes returned to our table, he cast a quick, almost imperceptible glance towards the fallen automaton. A flicker of something, recognition, surprise, crossed his cold features. Minutes later, Wyndham concluded his conversation. He rose, and as he did so, his foot nudged the miniature Nightingale. He bent down, picked it up, and examined it with a keen, almost faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He then slipped the automaton into his pocket, his gaze sweeping over the room, lingering for a moment on Holmes and myself. It was a look of chilling intelligence, a silent challenge. "He has taken the bait, Watson," Holmes whispered, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "He recognizes the Nightingale's unique signature. He believes it to be a key to verifying the stolen designs, perhaps even a prototype of some crucial component. He will now, I suspect, attempt to acquire the full design from us, or perhaps to eliminate us as a potential threat to his operations." He then rose. "Come, Watson. Our work here is done. We have identified our broker of patents, and now the true game begins." As we left the Cog and Compass, stepping back into the cold, fog-shrouded streets, I felt a profound sense of unease. Silas Wyndham, the seemingly respectable gentleman, the victim-turned-villain, was a far more dangerous adversary than any we had encountered before. His deception was meticulously crafted, his ruthlessness chilling. The shadow of the broker, I knew, was long and insidious, and its true depths remained to be plumbed. The Clockwork Nightingale, once a symbol of Elias Thorne's genius, was now a pawn in a far more perilous game, and Holmes, I sensed, was about to lead us into its very heart. Chapter 5. The Broker's Trap. The cold, fog-shrouded streets outside the Cog and Compass offered little comfort as Holmes and I emerged from the tavern. The revelation of Silas Wyndham's true identity, not as a victim but as the cunning broker of patents, had sent a chill far deeper than the November air. The man who had hired us, who had feigned distress and sought our aid, was in fact the orchestrator of the very crime we were investigating. His audacity was breathtaking, his ruthlessness chilling. "He has taken the bait, Watson," Holmes murmured, his voice grim, as we hailed a passing hansom cab. He recognized the Nightingale's unique signature in the replica. He knows we possess knowledge of his operations. He will now, I surmise, attempt to acquire the full designs from us, or more likely to eliminate us as a threat. I felt a profound sense of unease. But why, Holmes? Why reveal himself to us in such a manner? Why not simply attempt to acquire the patents through other means? "Because, my dear Watson, Wyndham is a man of immense ego," Holmes replied, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. "He enjoys the game, he revels in his own cunning, and by casting himself as the victim, by hiring us, he gained invaluable insight into our methods, into the very workings of my mind. He believed he could outmaneuver us, use us to his own ends, and then, perhaps, dispose of us when we had served our purpose." The cab rattled through the labyrinthine streets towards Baker Street. Holmes, now fully engaged, produced a small, leather-bound notebook and began to make rapid entries, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Wyndham's network, Watson, must be extensive," he mused. "He operates in the shadows of the industrial world, preying upon desperate inventors and ambitious apprentices. He has, no doubt, a network of informants, of agents, who assist him in his illicit trade. We must anticipate his next move." Upon our return to 221B, Holmes immediately retired to his chemical laboratory, a small, cluttered sanctum where he performed his more arcane analyses. I heard the faint clinking of glassware, the soft hiss of a Bunsen burner, and the occasional, almost inaudible, murmur as he worked. For nearly an hour, the only sounds were these, and the persistent scratching of my pen as I attempted to transcribe the day's events into my journal, my thoughts still reeling from the shocking revelation of Wyndham's treachery. Finally, Holmes emerged, his eyes gleaming with that familiar, almost feverish intensity that always signaled a significant breakthrough. He held a small glass vial containing a few drops of a clear, viscous liquid. "Watson," he announced, his voice low and resonant, "the game, my dear fellow, has entered its most perilous phase. I have been examining the residue left on the miniature Nightingale. It contains traces of a rare, highly potent soporific, a powerful sedative. This, I surmise, was intended for us." My blood ran cold. "A sedative? You mean he intended to drug us?" "Precisely," Holmes affirmed. "Wyndham, having identified us as a threat, would not resort to crude violence. He would prefer a more subtle, more elegant solution. A drugged incapacitation, followed by a quiet disappearance. He would then gain access to my notes, to your journal, and to any information we had gathered regarding his operations." He then produced a small folded piece of paper from his pocket. "This, Watson, was slipped under our door while we were at the Cog and Compass. A note, seemingly from Elias Thorne, requesting our immediate presence at his workshop. A matter of the gravest urgency, it claims. A trap, Watson. A meticulously laid trap." "A trap!" I exclaimed, my hand instinctively going to my revolver. "Indeed," Holmes said, a grim smile touching his lips. "Wyndham, having acquired the replica Nightingale, will now attempt to lure us to a secluded location where he can incapacitate us and secure his position. The workshop, being isolated and familiar to us, is the perfect setting for his nefarious plan. So what is our next move, Holmes?" "We play along, Watson," Holmes replied, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "We walk into the lion's den, but we do so with our eyes wide open and with a few surprises of our own. Wyndham believes he has the advantage of surprise. We shall disabuse him of that notion." He then outlined his counterplan. It was audacious, relying on precision, timing, and a deep understanding of Wyndham's arrogant overconfidence. He instructed me to prepare a strong, stimulating tonic, a counter-agent to the soporific he suspected Wyndham would attempt to administer. He also arranged for a discreet signal to be sent to Inspector Lestrade, informing him of a potential disturbance at Elias Thorne's workshop, but only to be acted upon after a specific period of time had elapsed. "We must allow Wyndham to believe his plan is unfolding perfectly, Watson," Holmes explained. "We must allow him to reveal his full hand. Only then can we truly unmask him and secure the evidence necessary for his downfall." The journey back to Elias Thorne's workshop was undertaken with a heightened sense of tension. The industrial district, usually a hive of activity, was now eerily quiet in the pre-dawn hours, its towering chimneys mere silhouettes against the bruised sky. The fog, though thinner, still clung to the ground, lending an ethereal quality to the deserted streets. We arrived at the workshop, its steel door looming ominously in the gloom. As Holmes had predicted, the door was slightly ajar, a subtle invitation. The pressure plate alarm, he surmised, had been disarmed. "A most welcoming gesture, Watson," Holmes murmured, a faint smile touching his lips. "Wyndham is confident. Overconfident, I dare say." We entered the workshop, the vast, silent space feeling strangely oppressive in the dim light. The scent of oil and metal was still pervasive, but now mingled with a faint, almost imperceptible, aroma of almonds, a telltale sign of certain chemical compounds. "The air, Watson," Holmes whispered, sniffing. "A subtle diffusion. He has already begun his work." We moved cautiously through the workshop, our footsteps muffled by the concrete floor. The display pedestal where the Clockwork Nightingale had once stood was now empty. The workbench was meticulously clean. There was no sign of Elias Thorne, nor of Thomas Finch or Miss Clara. Suddenly, a voice, cold and precise, echoed from the shadows at the far end of the workshop. "I trust you found my invitation. Good evening, gentlemen." Silas Wyndham emerged from the gloom, impeccably dressed as always, his features sharp and angular, his eyes cold and calculating. He held a small, ornate pistol in his gloved hand, its barrel glinting ominously in the dim light. Behind him, two hulking figures, Wyndham's enforcers, stepped out from the shadows, their faces grim, their hands clenched into fists. "Mr. Wyndham," Holmes said, his voice calm, yet imbued with an undeniable authority. A rather dramatic entrance, I must say, though somewhat lacking in originality. Wyndham chuckled, a dry, humourless sound. "Indeed, Mr. Holmes, but effective, I assure you. You're a formidable opponent, I will grant you that. Your deductions regarding the serpens viridis were most illuminating, but you have meddled in affairs far beyond your comprehension. The world of industrial espionage is a far more ruthless arena than your quaint criminal investigations." "And your methods, Mr. Wyndham," Holmes countered, "are as crude as they are predictable. Drugging your opponents? A rather uninspired tactic, even for a man of your limited imagination." Wyndham's eyes narrowed. "You speak with remarkable confidence, Mr. Holmes, for a man who is about to succumb to the effects of a potent soporific. The air in this workshop has been subtly infused for the past hour. You should be feeling its effects by now." I felt a sudden wave of dizziness, a slight blurring of my vision. The air indeed felt heavy, and my limbs seemed to grow sluggish. Wyndham's enforcers began to advance, their movements slow and deliberate. "Indeed, Mr. Wyndham," Holmes said, his voice now slightly slurred, his eyes drooping. He swayed slightly, and I felt a sudden urge to sit down, to simply close my eyes and rest. "A most effective compound." Wyndham smiled, a triumphant, predatory grin. "Excellent. The great Sherlock Holmes, brought low by a simple chemical compound. Now, gentlemen, if you would be so kind as to surrender your notes, and then perhaps take a long permanent rest." His enforcers moved in, their hands reaching for us. Just as they closed in, Holmes, with a sudden, almost miraculous burst of energy, straightened up, his eyes snapping open, blazing with a keen, unwavering intensity. His earlier slurring vanished, replaced by a sharp, clear voice. "A rather theatrical performance, Mr. Wyndham," Holmes declared, a triumphant smile now playing on his lips. "But you underestimate the resilience of the human constitution, particularly when fortified by a timely antidote. Watson, the tonic, if you please." With a swift movement, I produced the small vial of stimulating tonic Holmes had prepared. I uncorked it and, with a quick gulp, swallowed its contents. The dizziness vanished, replaced by a surge of clarity and renewed vigour. Wyndham's triumphant grin vanished, replaced by a look of utter shock and fury. "What? Impossible! You were drugged." "A mere feint, Mr. Wyndham," Holmes said, his voice ringing through the workshop. "A carefully orchestrated deception, designed to lure you into a false sense of security. You believed you had outmanoeuvred us. In truth, you merely walked into our trap." He then pointed to a small, almost invisible device he had concealed beneath his sleeve. It was a miniature, highly sensitive barometer designed to detect subtle changes in air pressure. "The moment you began to infuse the air with your soporific, Mr. Wyndham, this device alerted me. Your subtle diffusion was, to my instruments, a blatant declaration of intent." Wyndham roared in frustration, raising his pistol. His enforcers, momentarily stunned, now lunged forward. "Now, Watson," Holmes commanded. "The signal!" With a swift movement, I produced a small, prearranged signal flare from my pocket and ignited it. A brilliant, crimson light shot upwards, piercing the grimy skylight and illuminating the fog-shrouded sky above the industrial district. Wyndham, seeing the flare, cursed loudly. "The police! You fool! You've brought the police!" "Indeed, Mr. Wyndham," Holmes said, stepping forward, his eyes fixed on the enraged broker. "And they will be here shortly. Your reign of industrial espionage, your manipulation of desperate inventors, and your ruthless pursuit of ill-gotten gains ends tonight." Wyndham, his face contorted with fury, aimed his pistol at Holmes. But before he could fire, Holmes, with a sudden blinding speed, lunged forward, his long, slender fingers closing around Wyndham's wrist. There was a sharp crack, and the pistol clattered to the floor. Wyndham cried out in pain, his face paling. His two enforcers, seeing their leader disarmed, hesitated. I, meanwhile, had drawn my own revolver, its cold metal a reassuring weight in my hand. Just then, the distant wail of police sirens echoed through the fog, growing steadily louder. Wyndham's face sagged in defeat. His elaborate deception, his cunning manipulation, had finally unravelled. Moments later, the heavy steel door of the workshop burst open, and Inspector Lestrade, followed by a contingent of constables, rushed in, their truncheons drawn. "Holmes! Watson! What in blazes is going on here?" Lestrade exclaimed, his gaze sweeping over the scene. "A rather intricate case of industrial espionage, Lestrade," Holmes replied, his voice calm as he held Wyndham firmly by the wrist. "And a most cunning broker of patents who believed himself beyond the reach of the law. I believe you will find Mr. Silas Wyndham and his associates to be quite illuminating, once they have had a moment to reflect upon their folly." Lestrade, though still bewildered, quickly took charge. Wyndham and his enforcers were secured, their briefcases confiscated, and the workshop thoroughly examined for evidence. Elias Thorne, alerted by the commotion, soon arrived, his face a mixture of shock and profound relief. Miss Clara Thorne and Thomas Finch, bewildered but unharmed, were also brought to the workshop, where Holmes, with a gentle hand, explained the true nature of Wyndham's treachery. The Clockwork Nightingale, the object of so much intrigue, was found hidden in a secret compartment within Wyndham's briefcase, its silver feathers gleaming, its tiny sapphire eyes seeming to watch the unfolding drama with silent, mechanical judgment. It was returned to Elias Thorne, who clutched it to his chest, his eyes filled with gratitude. The case of the Automaton's secret, I knew then, was truly closed. The shadow of the broker, once long and insidious, had been dispelled by the sharp light of Holmes's intellect. Chapter 6. The Unveiling of the Mastermind. The workshop, moments before a scene of tense confrontation, now buzzed with the controlled chaos of a police investigation. Inspector Lestrade, his usual bluster replaced by a rare look of impressed bewilderment, oversaw the securing of Silas Wyndham and his enforcers. The air, still faintly tinged with the soporific's almond scent, slowly cleared as the workshop doors were thrown open to the pre-dawn chill. My own heart, though no longer pounding with the immediate threat of danger, still raced with the after-effects of the stimulating tonic and the sheer audacity of Wyndham's scheme. To think that the very man who had sought our aid was the orchestrator of the crime, and that he had meticulously laid a trap for Holmes and myself, was a testament to his cunning and to Holmes's even greater intellect. Holmes, having secured Wyndham's wrist and ensured his pistol was out of reach, now turned his attention to the Clockwork Nightingale. It lay nestled in the secret compartment of Wyndham's briefcase, its silver feathers gleaming in the harsh light of Lestrade's lantern. "A most exquisite piece of engineering, Lestrade," Holmes observed, his voice calm, yet imbued with a quiet triumph. And the object of a rather intricate case of industrial implications merely grunted. "Industrial espionage, Holmes? And Wyndham, the respectable gentleman, this is a fine mess you've landed us in." "On the contrary, Lestrade," Holmes replied, a faint smile touching his lips, "I believe I have merely untangled a knot of deceit that has plagued this industrial quarter for some time. Mr. Silas Wyndham is not merely a respectable gentleman, he is a cunning broker of patents, preying upon the genius of others and manipulating the vulnerable for his own illicit gain." He then explained with concise brilliance the entire convoluted plot: Thomas Finch's unrequited love for Miss Clara, his naive attempt to win her affection by stealing the Nightingale's patents, and Wyndham's insidious manipulation of Thomas for his own ends. He detailed the hidden panel, the precise glass cutting, the soporific in the air, and Wyndham's audacious trap. Elias Thorne, alerted by the commotion, soon arrived, his face a mixture of shock and profound relief as he saw his beloved Nightingale unharmed in Holmes's hands. Miss Clara Thorne and Thomas Finch, bewildered but unharmed, were also brought to the workshop. Thomas, confronted with the evidence of his journal and Wyndham's treachery, broke down, weeping openly. Miss Clara, though initially stunned, quickly grasped the magnitude of Wyndham's manipulation, and a look of profound pity, rather than anger, settled upon her features as she looked at Thomas. So, the rival's insidious grin Miss Clara perceived, I mused aloud, was not Mr. Croft, but Wyndham all along. "Precisely, Watson," Holmes affirmed. "Wyndham, through his network of informants, would have known of Elias Thorne's latest invention, its revolutionary patents, and its immense market value. He would also have been aware of Thomas Finch's infatuation with Miss Clara, and his desperate desire to prove himself. It was a perfect opportunity for a man of Wyndham's ruthless ambition." He then turned to Wyndham, who stood sullenly, his face a mask of defeat. "Your network, Mr. Wyndham, will now be exposed. Your informants, your agents, your illicit trade, all will come to light. The Clockwork Nightingale, far from being a tool for your profit, has become the instrument of your downfall." Wyndham, his eyes blazing with a final flicker of defiance, merely sneered. "You may have won this skirmish, Holmes, but the world of innovation is vast. There will always be those who seek to profit from the genius of others. You cannot stop progress." "Progress, Mr. Wyndham," Holmes countered calmly, "is built upon integrity and honest endeavour, not upon theft and manipulation. Your methods are not progress, they are a blight upon the very spirit of invention." Lestrade, having heard enough, stepped forward. "Take them away, lads, and make sure you search every inch of this workshop for any further evidence. Holmes, I'll need a full report from you at the yard first thing in the morning." "Indeed, Lestrade," Holmes replied, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "I shall be delighted to provide you with every detail. The nuances of this case, I assure you, are quite illuminating." As Wyndham and his enforcers were led away, their figures disappearing into the pre-dawn fog, a sense of quiet triumph settled upon the workshop. Elias Thorne clutched his Clockwork Nightingale to his chest, his eyes filled with gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. Miss Clara Thorne, with a gentle hand, attempted to comfort the distraught Thomas Finch, whose misguided love had led him down such a perilous path. The days that followed were a blur of activity. The police investigation, guided by Holmes's unparalleled insights, quickly dismantled Wyndham's network of industrial spies and illicit brokers. Several other inventors who had fallen prey to Wyndham's schemes came forward, their stories corroborating Holmes's deductions. The Clockwork Nightingale's patents were secured, its future now safe in Elias Thorne's capable hands. Thomas Finch, though facing charges for his involvement in the theft, received a lenient sentence due to his manipulation by Wyndham and his genuine remorse. Miss Clara Thorne, touched by his misguided devotion, vowed to help him rebuild his life, perhaps even to continue his apprenticeship under her uncle's guidance, albeit under stricter supervision. The industrial district, though still a place of ceaseless toil, seemed to breathe a little easier. The shadow of the broker, once long and insidious, had been dispelled by the sharp light of Holmes's intellect. Our final evening at Baker Street, after the last reports had been filed and the last details confirmed, was a quiet affair. Holmes sat in his armchair, his pipe emitting a fragrant plume of smoke, a rare look of contentment on his face. I, for my part, meticulously recorded the final details of the case of the Automaton's secret in my journal, aware that it would stand as another testament to my friend's extraordinary genius. Watson, Holmes mused, without looking up from his contemplation of the fire, the human mind, in its boundless capacity for both creation and corruption, remains the most fascinating subject of all. Wyndham, for all his cunning, ultimately underestimated the power of truth and the unwavering dedication of those who seek it. Indeed, Holmes, I replied, closing my journal, a most intricate case. It reminds us that even in the most modern of settings, the ancient vices of greed and ambition continue to drive men to extraordinary lengths. He then leaned forward, a familiar glint in his eye. The world, my dear fellow, is filled with such shadows, lurking not only in the grand halls of the aristocracy, but in the bustling workshops of industry and within the very fabric of seemingly respectable society. Our work, therefore, is never truly done. For as long as there are those who seek to exploit the genius of others, who mistake cunning for intellect, or who pursue profit through deceit, the game, Watson, will always be afoot. And with that he settled back, his gaze already distant, no doubt contemplating the next intricate puzzle that the vast, enigmatic city of London would inevitably present. Thank you so much for listening to our Honouring Audiobooks original Sherlock Holmes adventure. We hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to leave a comment letting us know which story you'd like to hear next and where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from our detective fans around the world. See you in the next adventure.